Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about filtering data events using trigger conditions. Let's go. So let's talk a little bit about why this concept is important. So number one, filtering events at the source reduces flow run consumption. Now this used to be really important, and I think now it's still important, but it kind of depends on the type of flow license that you have. If you are in the Office 365 space where you do have so many runs per user per month, naturally you don't want to be wasting your flow runs on data events that you're just going to discard anyways. Because the alternative, if you don't do this, and I'm sure you've probably done this in the past, especially before this feature was released, was that you probably had a condition that existed inside of the middle of your flow that said, if value equals X, then go do these things. Otherwise, just exit the flow. And what we can do is use filter expressions up front to not even pick up that event, and as a result, not even use another flow run. Another thing that is important is that this will simplify your support and maintenance. If you're ever trying to debug a flow, or you're trying to find a specific instance of a flow and you find yourself in run history, it's kind of like finding a needle in the haystack. If you've got a bunch of these different events that are irrelevant to your scenario, if you can just discard those and not even bring them in to your run history because you didn't actually process those events, it just keeps things cleaner. And then lastly, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick, or at least how I go ahead and build out my expressions before I put them in my trigger. This just simplifies my overall experience and gives me more predictability about, is this condition going to work once I put it in a trigger.
iListNote is a community resource that covers best practices, tips, and latest announcements built on contributions by technology enthusiasts and collated from various resources. This resource is structured as first-hand reference material for anybody working with Azure serverless integration. You can go ahead and subscribe to newsletters and browse serverless tips. The Serverless Notes community is brought to you by Serverless 360, a portal focused on operations and support for Microsoft Azure serverless resources. It provides exceptional tooling that is not available in the Azure portal and is an alternative to custom-built solutions. You can find more at serverless360.com.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our scenario. So we have someone, an employee, that's going to go ahead and submit their expenses, and this is going to end up in a SharePoint list. Now, it doesn't really matter how this data gets inputted. Could be directly on the form, could be a Power App, could be a form, doesn't really matter. But the point is we might want to be notified when someone submits an expense that is greater than $200. And in this case, what we want to do is filter out any of these expense entries at the source if they don't meet our criteria, and that criteria is the amount being greater than $200. So in the event that a record is created in this expense tracker SharePoint list, we do want that flow to fire, and then we want to ingest that information. Now, I do have a compose step. I'm going to show you why when we get into the demo, but this is really how I go ahead and set up my expression and am able to debug it really easily by using this approach. And then lastly, I just have a notification just so that I get notified of that specific event. So let's go ahead and let's jump into a demo and let's see this live. So let's go ahead and let's just run the demo, and then after I will walk you through step by step how I went and configured my flow. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to create two expense entries. And here we're going to say this one is called less than 200. And we're going to put the amount as just saying $15, and then we'll provide an expense date. This date is arbitrary, doesn't really matter. We're just going to go ahead and hit save. And then what we're going to do is create another entry, and this one is going to be called greater than 200. And we're going to make this 250, and we'll once again provide a date. Now, what's going to happen is these flows are going to run, and we should only see one of them actually enter our flow. So let's go ahead, let's dive into our flow and take a closer look. Okay, we can see that our flow has run, and only one message was picked up. I do have two here, but one was from the previous day, which I was basically getting everything set up for this recording. Now, if we go ahead and we click on the run that did flow through and we go ahead and click on the trigger, we're going to see that it was our entry that had a title of greater than 200 and we have our amount of 250. So that explains why it actually was picked up by our flow. So let's go ahead, let's dive in and see how I configured this flow. Now the trigger itself doesn't look all that unique, certainly not on the surface. I don't have any advanced options, but what does make this trigger unique is the settings. So if I go ahead and click on the ellipsis, then head over to settings and scroll down, we're going to see that I have a trigger condition. And what this trigger condition is saying is go ahead, get the amount field from our trigger message body, then go ahead and see if it's greater than 200. If it is greater than 200, then that means our message is going to enter our flow and the rest of our processing will take place. Otherwise, it just becomes a regular data check where we didn't find the data that met our needs and therefore our flow doesn't actually get instantiated. Now, this is where I talked about having a compose action just to help with when establishing our trigger condition. Now, if we go back here, we'll see that there isn't really an autocomplete or an IntelliSense environment to create these conditions. So what we can do is we can go ahead and use a compose action, construct our expression as we usually would, and then what we can do is not apply the trigger condition and let a few test messages come into our flow. If we see that our condition is being executed correctly and our result is true, we know that we have the correct expression and can therefore copy and paste it into our trigger. Now, one thing to note is here, you'll notice I don't have the @ sign in front of the expression, but when I go into my trigger condition, I have to include this. If I don't include it, I'm going to get an error. And so this is a simple trick that you can use to help simplify establishing a trigger condition, because what will happen is if you just put it right into your trigger and you're getting unexpected results, it becomes very difficult to troubleshoot them. Much easier to do that using a compose action, and then once you're confident, take that expression, put it into your trigger, and then make sure you include the @ symbol at the beginning of your expression. Lastly, I just have a send a mobile notification. This is just for me to be able to test this out and see when I have any requests that are greater than $200. Thanks everyone for checking out this episode. If you aren't following me on social media, I would encourage you to do so. You can find me at Weare on Twitter. Naturally, you're watching this video on YouTube, but if you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do so. Also, any likes or comments are also appreciated. In addition, I do have some courses on Logic Apps and Power Automate. You can find them on Udemy, but I do have some discount codes for you at the following URL.